They say you never forget the moment your world shifts. But mine didn't come with a bang, it came with a knock. Not the kind you hear on your front door, but the kind that echoes from inside the bones. I was slicing a cold leftover pork chop in the Sentinel Logistics break room 4:15 p.m. on a Thursday when I heard Julian stilettos click, click, click across the linoleum like the Godin countdown to a bomb. That's when I knew the corporate storm had officially made landfall. Let me set the scene before the mushroom cloud. 14 years in this hell-colored cubicle farm, and I still had the same stapler, the same mug, the same bulletproof red pen I used to annihilate contractor invoices that tried to sneak past compliance. I wasn't flashy. Hell, I barely spoke above a librarian's whisper, but I was the reason Sentinel still had a defense contract with Uncle Sam. Level 4 security clearance on the wall of my office, the one signed by a man who'd once personally overseen nuclear storage in Nevada. That was mine, not the company's. Mine personal, non-transferable, no clearance, no contract. It was the only thing in that whole damn building that couldn't be downsized or duplicated. Of course, no one ever bothered to ask about it anymore. Not since the new VP of Operations got installed like a broken toilet. You see, Templeton, 23 years old, finance degree from a college that sounded made up, had a LinkedIn headshot that looked like she just tried kombucha for the first time and hated it. He was the CEO's nephew, which explained everything and justified nothing. On day one, she called my department redundant during a town hall while sipping something match green from a mason jar. On day two, he asked if we could just download a compliance app instead before we go any further. Hey, yeah, you the one listening to this while doing dishes or hiding from your boss. 94% of y'all never hit that subscribe button. It's free, takes one tap, and helps our little misfit team keep telling the kind of stories that HR departments would rather keep buried. Toss a like our way too if you smiled or cringed so far. We see you, we appreciate you. Now back to our regular programming, anyway, here's the fun part. Despite my reputation as the paper push from hell, I actually liked my job. I liked walking into a room and watching the blood drain from a manager's face when I asked if their QA process was auditable. I liked the smell of fresh toner on a correctly formatted acquisition summary. I liked knowing I was the firewall between Sentinel and a multi-million-dollar federal fine. But things were shifting. You could feel it in the air ducts. Appliance reports started getting lost. Julian's pet hires were rewriting internal soaps with crayons and confidence. I found a revised clearance checklist on SharePoint that was missing half the sections and had emojis in the margins. I printed it out, bled red ink correcting it, and left it on his desk with a post-it note that just said no. He never responded. But the next day, HR asked me to start logging my time on a new productivity dashboard. That was the first domino. The engineers still respected me. One of them, Oliver, brought me a Dunkin' on Monday and whispered, "They're gutting us, Elias. Your name came up." He looked pale. He always looked pale, but this time it had that funeral pal. I went back to my desk, closed my door, and clicked over to the Defense Security Service portal. Just a peek. My clearance was still active, tied directly to contract 499-73, a status. Key person of record. You'd think that would make someone upstairs pause before swinging the axe. But Julian Montgomery didn't pause. She probably didn't even scroll. He had that look in his eyes, the one you see in kids who win Monopoly by stealing from the bank. No rules, just vibes. I kept doing my job. I processed 3 contract renewals, 2 internal audits, and a whistleblower report that had been quietly retracted, probably under pressure from one of Julian's frat bro strategists. I didn't make noise. I didn't gossip. I kept the engine running even as they poured sugar in the tank. Every night before I left, I looked at that clearance letter. The ink was starting to fade. I should have gotten it reprinted. But something about that slow decay felt poetic. They thought I was the wallpaper. They forgot I was the wiring. They see Templeton made his grand entrance wearing loafers that cost more than my monthly mortgage, and a blazer so white I thought someone had put a lab coat on a TikTok influencer. He strutted through the Sentinel Logistics lobby, with all the grace of a deer that had recently discovered cocaine, wide-eyed, overconfident, and utterly unaware he was headed for a meat grinder. The CEO, Richard Montgomery, his uncle of course, introduced him at a hastily scheduled all-hands meeting like he was a visiting dignitary. "We're proud to welcome our new Vice President of Operations, Julian Montgomery," he said, beaming with the smug radiance of a man who thinks nepotism smells like success. Half the room clapped. The other half Googled job openings under the table. Julian took the mic and opened with a PowerPoint titled, "Efficiency is the New Growth." First slide said we spend too much in 72-point font. His second slide showed a pie chart with 3 slices labeled salaries, office snacks, and I wish I were kidding. He spoke in that startup conference cadence, every sentence ending in a question, like he was afraid of commitment. So like, why are we still using all these legacy systems, and like, do we need so many departments? She dropped the line that echoed down the hallways for weeks. Compliance is kind of a black hole of productivity, right? I sat in the back of the room, stone still, nursing a lukewarm cup of green tea and pure undistilled dread. I knew that tone. That was the tone of someone who'd never written a risk mitigation plan, never survived a federal audit, never had to explain to a contractor why using unsecured cloud storage was not just easier. Was the tone of someone who thought Excel macros were sorcery and that regulatory burden meant too much homework. 2 days later, the downsizing began. Hile managers started evaporating like dew in July. You'd pass someone's cubicle in the morning, see their bobbleheads lined up like usual. Then by lunch, the place looked like a ransacked Radio Shack. Quiet exits, no drama, no emails, just vanishing. I watched it all from behind my tempered glass office door, sipping coffee like a funeral guest and mentally inventorying the bodies. Supply chain director gone, QA lead gone. The guy who maintained the encrypted VPN tunnels for our remote duty access gone, all in the name of operational hygiene, as Julian called it. She stopped by my office once, just once, popped his head in like she was checking to see if I was still alive, tilted his head and looked at the clearance certificate on my wall like it was a piece of abstract art he didn't understand but wanted to insult. "So, like you're in compliance?" he asked, blinking like a confused house cat. "What do all you compliance people even do anyway?" I smiled. Not warmly, not rudely, just knowingly. "We make sure the company doesn't get banned from doing business with the federal government," I said. Among other things, she blinked again. "Right, I'm trying to simplify some stuff. Trim the fat. I'll circle back." He didn't, but the writing was on the walls and not in ink. It was in passive-aggressive memos, sudden meeting cancellations, and a company's Slack channel that went from cheerful to eerily silent in under a week. One afternoon, I overheard a junior analyst whispering to someone near the vending machines. "They're building a new org chart. I heard Elias's team isn't on it." He sounded nervous. He was speaking Voldemort's name. I didn't flinch. I'd been through reorganizations before, survived 5 CEOs, 2 mergers, and a whistleblower event that nearly landed our CFO in prison. But this felt different. This felt reckless. Not cold-blooded, clueless, and that's what made it dangerous. The engineers started avoiding eye contact with me in the halls as if their fear might be contagious. My inbox started getting coped less. My name vanished from meeting invites. One day, the badge reader outside my office lagged for a full 5 seconds before turning green. It's amazing how fast a fortress can feel like a trap. One minute you're the gatekeeper, the next you're the ghost of a system nobody wants to admit they still depend on. But I didn't panic. I didn't run to HR. I didn't send pleading emails or gather allies. I did what I always do. I waited, observed. I quietly pulled out my hard copy compliance calendar and circled the date 85 days from now. That's when the federal clearance renewal audit was scheduled. They wouldn't make it that far. It happened on a Tuesday, not even a dramatic one, just a gray-skied middle-of-the-quarter Tuesday, where the coffee tasted like burnt toast and the hallway smelled like someone microwaved tuna in the break room again. I just finished redlining a procurement clause so sloppy it might have been written by a raccoon with a gambling problem when my screen blinked. Meeting request Julian Montgomery immediate. No subject line, no context, just the scent of something dying. His assistant met me halfway down the hallway, lips tight, eyes low. He didn't speak, just nodded toward the big glass conference room like I was walking into an intervention or an execution. AC was already seated, elbows perched on the table, nails clicking his tablet like she was playing Candy Crush with human lives. He didn't ask me to sit, didn't make eye contact. She just flipped her screen around like a bad magician, revealing a disappointing trick. I'll get to the point, he said in that staccato, sugar-coated malice voice she used when trying to sound like a grown-up. After reviewing operational redundancies, you've determined your role is no longer aligned with our strategic objectives. No thank you for your service. No mention of my 12 spotless years. Not even a lie about new directions or changing needs. Just a recycled paper termination letter slid across the glass like a coaster. 2 weeks severance, she added as if she were offering me a coupon. I stared at the letter. It was printed in Comic Sans. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. He didn't throw a chair through the window like Oscar from Logistics did when they offloaded him last spring. I just stood there, my fingers curling once around the strap of my canvas tote bag like I was about to buy kale at a farmer's market instead of getting booted from the only job that ever respected my paranoia. Then I asked the only question that mattered. Who's listed on the cage file for defense compliance? Julian blinked, confused. Lips twitched like he wanted to ask what a cage file was, but didn't want to admit she didn't know. I don't have that in front of me right now, he said, and looked down at his tablet like it might save her. It didn't. CAGE stands for Commercial and Government Entity. It's how the Department of Defense knows who's authorized to handle what. Every defense contractor has a record. That record includes key personnel, and mine, still the only name on file for Sentinel's most sensitive contracts. You should probably look that up, I said. My voice was ice over gasoline. I reached for the termination letter and folded it once sharply like I was creasing a flag at a military funeral. Then I walked out, not slowly, not defiantly, just perfectly timed. My badge still worked at the door. No security escort, no whisper campaign, just a quiet exit. Made 2 stops before I left the building. First I visited the server room, not to tamper, not to sabotage, just to look. One last look at the blinking lights, the heartbeat of the compliance systems I'd helped build. I trained the engineers on that setup, wrote the backup protocols myself. They'd have to rip it all out now to scrub me from the logs. Second, I ducked into my office and logged into the Defense Security Service portal, standard post-employment protocol for clearance holders. I submitted my revocation notice. Flagged myself as separated from Sentinel Logistics. No one at Sentinel got the alert. No one ever watches the real-time dashboard. They just assume the machine keeps humming as long as the lights are on and someone's in the chair. I left behind my mug, my stapler, and the framed DoD certificate. Let it all rot. The last thing I did before stepping outside, pulled out my personal binder, the one labeled 499 to 73Y primary access logs, and slid it into my tote. 14 years of signed chain of custody forms, time-stamped audit trails, escalation logs. Every inch of regulatory compliance boiled down into 1,000 tiny receipts. The air outside smelled like rain and exhaust. I took the deepest breath I'd had in months. I wasn't unemployed. I was unshackled, armed. For the first time in years, I wasn't keeping them safe. I was letting them burn. I spent my first day of unemployment at a diner that hadn't changed its menu since the Cold War. Vinyl booths, real half and half in sweating metal creamers, and a waitress named Helen who called me Han, even though I looked like I hadn't slept in 3 fiscal quarters. She poured my coffee without asking and topped it off every 7 minutes like she was trying to keep my blood at a legal caffeine limit. I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry. I wasn't anything really. Just level like someone who'd walked away from a slow-motion car crash they'd seen coming for miles. Julian had pulled the pin, but the grenade was still ticking. No smoke, no bang. Not yet. I didn't update LinkedIn. Didn't craft a resume or blast my network with teed goodbyes. I didn't need to do it. People like me don't find jobs. They get whispered about until someone knocks on their door with an NDA and a non-compete waiver in hand. Instead, I texted Diana. Diana and I had done battle side by side at an aerospace firm back in the early 2010s, where we spent 3 years cleaning up a compliance nightmare so bad it made national news. Once had an unauthorized drone prototype in her garage for 6 weeks while we sorted out export licensing. If anyone understood the value of silence, it was her coffee. I texted. No emojis, no explanation. Her reply came back 10 minutes later. Black Noon Hannigans. We didn't talk about jobs. We talked about inventory codes, pending regulations, and the new cybersecurity clause in the DoD. She asked about Sentinel. I shrugged. They're streamlining, I said. She snorted into her mug. Idiots. I didn't agree. I didn't disagree. I just sipped. Back at Sentinel, the world spun on, oblivious. Julian strutted through the hallways like a rooster in a power suit. She told a room full of senior staff that she'd cut bloat by 22% in under a month. She said it with the smug satisfaction of someone who thought deleting files freed up hard drive space in real life. People clapped, not because they meant it, because they were scared not to do so. They held momentum meetings and sent emails about culture pivots. She hired a consultant with a man bun and a Bluetooth headset to revamp departmental relevance. Compliance was renamed Business Risk Alignment, then folded under Finance. My old office became a wellness nook with succulents and one of those little sand gardens no one ever rakes. But none of that mattered because 3 days after my exit, while I was reading a paperback mystery in a park and watching squirrels fight over a French fry, my phone buzzed. One notification: SS Alert Clearance Deactivation Confirmed. Subject: Elias Vance. Status: Revoked Associated Contracts. 499 to 73. Why Key Person Flag Active. Compliance Notice: No valid clearance holder on file, action required. Contract suspension review in progress. I read it twice. The language was dry clinical. But if you'd ever worked in federal contracting, you knew what it meant. Sentinel wasn't just flying blind or flying without a license. I stared at that screen like it was a countdown clock no one else could see. Somewhere deep in a Pentagon server stack, a red flag had just lit up next to their name. And nobody at Sentinel had the clearance or the knowledge to even realize it. Julian was probably doing celebratory lunges on the office Peloton, still bragging about budget cuts. He didn't know the blast radius had already been triggered. The countdown wasn't weeks away. It was days, maybe less. And I just sat there on that park bench, surrounded by seagull droppings and distant lawnmower hums, and let the sun warm my face. Nothing to fix, nothing to monitor, no alerts to triage, just time, and the quiet thrill of inevitability. The tremor didn't start with an earthquake. It started with a phone call and the wrong person answering it. Sentinel's main line rang at 10:15 a.m., outed by muscle memory and indifference, straight to Julian Montgomery's desk. The receptionist was new, fresh out of college, probably told to send anything compliance to the woman with the title. Poor kid didn't know he just handed a lit match to a toddler in a fireworks factory. The man on the other end wasn't a vendor. He wasn't a contractor or a confused supplier. He was a federal compliance liaison from the Defense Contract Management Agency. Kind of guy who doesn't call unless the system has already coughed up smoke and the red tape's tightening like a noose. According to my friend, still stuck inside that cubicle circus, the call lasted 55 seconds. Hi, this is Agent Mason with DCMA. I'm looking to confirm the active clearance holder for contract 499 to 73Y. Oh, we let her go, Julian said, apparently laughing. Imagine she twirled a pen in her hand while saying it, maybe leaned back in her ergonomic throne like she just ordered another overpriced oat milk latte. He didn't ask why they were asking, didn't offer a replacement name, just tossed my entire clearance like it was yesterday's gluten-free muffin. The agent didn't respond. He didn't have to, because 6 hours later, at precisely 4:05 p.m., the first doors locked. Not metaphorically, physically. Keycard access at the Sentinel R&D site in Virginia began failing. Contractors were locked out. A software engineering team got stranded in the lobby, while armed guards double-checked badges they'd used for years. The automated system flagged every user tied to 499 to 73Y for temporary denial. Phones started ringing. Emails stacked like Jenga towers in inboxes. Company Slack went from cat memes to urgent, who changed access. Then the DoD portal changed. That portal, cold and colorless, as a morgue drawer updated its status to contract 388 to 52X license, suspended pending verification reason. No valid clearance holder on file, action. Immediate halt of related operations. It was like watching a slow-moving avalanche reach the first cabin on the slope. Meanwhile, I was in my kitchen steeping a bag of Earl Grey and watching a spider try to escape my sink. My phone pinged. An email from the DSS system. Subject: Clearance Flag Confirmation Body. Notification of license status. Flagged organization. Sentinel Logistics Contract 499 to 73Y. Suspended compliance note. No valid security clearance holder listed. Contact must be re-established within 48 hours to avoid federal investigation. I stared at it while the kettle clicked off. No rush of adrenaline, no swelling music, just steam and inevitability. I glanced at the clock, wrote the time down in a notebook. Nothing fancy, just a little habit I picked up over the years. Timestamps matter when people start pretending they didn't know. I didn't smile. I didn't scowl. I simply walked over to the cabinet, picked my favorite mug, the one with the tiny chip in the rim, and poured the tea. Let the circus run out of popcorn. I'd seen this movie before, but this time I wasn't in it. I was the credits rolling behind the panic. I was the name they forgot to learn until it was too late. And now, I was just having tea. Let the tremors begin. At precisely 8:45 a.m. the next morning, you see, Templeton walked into the Sentinel executive wing, holding a smoothie, the color of antifreeze, and humming something off-key about being a disruption architect. She made it halfway to her glass-walled corner office before two men in dark suits and federal lanyards stepped into her path like bouncers at the gates of accountability. Julian Montgomery, one asked. She blinked, then smiled. Hi, yes. Can I help? He held up a tablet with the Defense Contract Management Agency. We need to speak with your compliance lead. Now I am compliance, he said, still smiling. Like this was an orientation. The taller one gave her a long, empty stare. The kind that doesn't blink. The kind that means, ma'am, please stop talking before we get to handcuffs. By 9:30, panic had reached the oxygen vents. Badge systems were still down. Sentinel's East Coast subconnector had pulled their field team. One of the manufacturing facilities had been told by a Pentagon contact, no less, that any further product movement on contract 499-73Y would be considered a breach. Clients were calling. A contractor from Lockheed had already flagged Sentinel as non-compliant pending review in an internal vendor alert, and the cherry on top. The internal project dashboard for the 388 series lit up red. Project status suspended, awaiting clearance verification. Meanwhile, the CEO, Richard Montgomery, was stomping down hallways like a Clydesdale with a head wound, demanding answers. Who the hell signed off on his termination? He barked at an assistant who looked like she might faint. Do you people understand what's happening? We've got $120 million in active deliverables frozen. Someone muttered that Julian had called it a routine streamlining. Another said he had approval from HR, and I don't care if she had Jesus Christ's signature in blood. Richard snapped. Where's Elias Vance? That was the moment they all realized something. They didn't know. They didn't know where I'd gone. Didn't know what I'd taken. Didn't know what I'd left behind. And worst of all, they didn't know what I knew. They'd erased me from the org chart. But I'd written the damn chart. The federal officers weren't subtle. Marched through the building with clipboards requesting documentation. When Julian tried to explain that he was in the process of realigning risk ownership, one of them actually laughed out loud like a bark, then handed her a printed excerpt from Sentinel Active Licensing Agreement. Continuity of clearance. Any termination of key compliance personnel must be reported to the DCMA within 48 hours. Failure to demonstrate continuity of clearance within 48 hours will result in automatic contract suspension and mandatory review. It had been 76 hours. Time was up. From my end, I was watching all this unfold in real time. Not from a spy camera, but from the beautiful, bizarre leaks that happen when enough terrified mid-level managers start replying. All screenshots, forwarded emails, frantic texts from ex-corkers who used to barely nod at me in the hallway, now begging for a quick call. I ignored most of them except for one from Oliver, the engineer who used to bring me coffee when he knew I'd pulled an all-nighter, are chasing audit discrepancies. Oliver, they've brought in federal compliance. Julian's locked in a room with them. Richard is losing it. What did you do? I stared at the screen for a second, then replied me. I made tea because I had lovely jasmine this time, paired with almond biscotti from a bakery near my house that doesn't even have a Yelp listing. And as the chaos ricocheted through the pristine, sterile hallways of Sentinel's HQ, I sat on my porch in a cardigan, legs tucked up, sipping slowly. I didn't need vengeance. I had protocol. By Friday morning, Terra Systems wasn't just leaking, it was hemorrhaging. A check dashboards turned from red to gray as suspended statuses became indefinite. Client portals timed out. Supplier calls went unanswered. Payroll flagged errors tied to unassigned clearance holders. And somewhere in the middle of that growing graveyard of blinking alerts, Richard Montgomery was standing in his executive conference room, white-knuckling a legal pad and muttering the same 5 words to every person who walked through the door. There's got to be a work hound. There wasn't. Legal had already combed the contract, so had the federal compliance team. The clause was simple, brutal, and enforced by a system not interested in feelings. Once a key person is removed, a replacement must be named and cleared within 48 hours. Failure to do so triggers an automatic suspension that can only be reversed by full re-ate, meaning forms, filings, interviews, third-party consultants, system scrubs, and best of all, 6-month minimum timeline for recertification. Richard demanded a list of names to fast-track. There were none. Clearance applications take months. Background checks, polygraphs, field interviews. One exec apparently suggested bribing someone at defense. He was escorted from the room within 10 minutes. Then came the deeper rot. Sentinel's internal audit system flagged every access log tied to compliance operations over the past 3 years. Everything I'd touched, every timestamp, every escalation, every contractor vetting had my signature, my trace, my ID. No one could replicate it. No one dared. I had been meticulous, ruthless even. I'd built the paper trail like a bunker, not a bridge. Every time someone tried to override one of my archive decisions, the system spat back a rejection, citing an active clearance authority. Like the ghost of my login was still guarding the gates. Meanwhile, Julian, who was pulled from the restructuring task force like a loose tooth, quietly at first, just missing from one agenda, then scrubbed from the org chart entirely. But by noon, someone leaked an internal memo. Effective immediately, all restructuring decisions issued under VP Templeton are suspended pending compliance resolution. It didn't take long for the vultures to find the scent. At 2:30 p.m., Fence Today posted a headline, "Federal contractor frozen amid clearance debacle inside the collapse at Sentinel." The article didn't name me, but it didn't need to do so. Sources confirmed the clearance in question was tied to a long-serving compliance officer terminated during a recent leadership shakeup. That's when I got the wine basket. It showed up at my door around 5 p.m. No card, no note, just a perfectly chilled bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon, 2 bars of dark chocolate, and a small ceramic coaster that said, "Cheers to the quiet ones." I didn't need to guess who sent it. There are only so many people in the city who understand what it means when a man in his late 40s dismantles an entire compliance infrastructure without raising her voice. I poured a glass, sat down, put on a Nina Simone record. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "We've been following what happened. No pressure. Just know we're ready when you are." I didn't respond, not yet. Because the funny thing about power, you don't always need to swing it. Sometimes it's enough to let them realize you still have it, and they don't. The office was colder than I remembered, sleek, glassy. The kind of place where even the potted plants looked like they had NDAs. 4th floor of a downtown tower, city view so sharp it could shave you. Across the table sat Elijah Stone, VP of Strategic Growth at Apex Horizon, Liz's most persistent, most silently vengeful competitor. He didn't offer a job, he offered a seat. Senior Advisor Defense Risk Compliance. Equity heavy, minimal travel, total autonomy, he said, sliding the term sheet across the table like it was a dessert menu. But let's be honest, we're not here because you need work. We're here because you built the playbook. I glanced at the offer, read every line twice. It was generous, overly so. No HR fluff, vague platitudes, just numbers, expectations, options, power, and silence. Elijah leaned back, folding his hands. "We'll let you run your own team. You pick your hires, you shape the protocols, and you answer to no one but me and only when necessary." I sipped my coffee, let the silence stretch just long enough to make him sweat. Then I asked one question. "Can I bring my clearance file with me?" He smiled. "Already cleared that with our legal team. Transfers the second you sign." I didn't smile back, not because I wasn't pleased, but because this wasn't about revenge. It was about permanence. Sentinel had tried to erase me, Apex was giving me ink. By the time I walked out of that building, Sentinel was coughing blood through a full forensic audit. The board had hired an outside compliance firm to untangle the spaghetti Julian had left behind. Every budget cut he made was flagged. Free policy rewrite was suspended. Her consultant army of yoga coach adjacent strategy specialists had already been escorted out, some still holding their branded Sentinel water bottles like war relics. Rumor had it one of the contractors tried to access the export compliance database and accidentally triggered a federal lockout protocol. The system bricked itself for 48 hours. Entire files went dark. Federal liaison showed up again. This time with laptops and subpoenas, and Richard, he didn't rage. He retreated. At first it was whispers he missed a board meeting, then an all-hands call where the CFO awkwardly read his prepared remarks. Then came the official statement. Our CEO, Richard Montgomery, will be taking an extended leave of absence to address a private family medical matter. We thank him for his leadership. They called it family medical leave. Everyone knew it was exile. And Julian, she vanished. No posts, no login, no appearances. Her email bounced. Her Instagram went private. Last anyone saw, his condo was dark and the doorman said he'd left town unexpectedly. I didn't ask where she went. Didn't care. I had other things to tend to, a new office, a new title, an equity agreement sitting in my inbox, waiting for my signature. And for the first time in 14 years, I didn't feel like a firewall or a paper shield or name at the bottom of a compliance memo. I felt like a cornerstone, foundational, untouchable. I stared out the window of my temporary office, still waiting on furniture, and watched the Sentinel building across the skyline flicker under the noon sun. One floor dark, probably the compliance wing. Fitting. I clicked open the final page of the term sheet, scrolled to the bottom, hovered over accept, but I didn't click. Not yet, because they'd given me the one thing Sentinel never did. Terms. It was a Monday. Bright, cloudless. The kind of morning that tricks you into thinking nothing bad can happen before noon. Richard Montgomery sat alone in the executive conference room at Sentinel, lights off, blinds drawn. The one-sprouted leather chairs around him were empty. 3 board members had resigned, 2 were under investigation, and the rest were hiding behind outside counsel, aged 15 years in the past 2 weeks. His hair had grayed in strange, uneven patches. His tie sat loose around his neck like a noose he hadn't quite figured out how to tighten. His phone sat on the table in front of him, vibrating in steady little bursts, like it was trying to warn him of something biblical. And then it rang. Unmarked number, DC area code. He answered with a grunt, already knowing it wasn't good. Mr. Templeton, came the voice on the other. Not sharp, not angry, calm, cold, controlled. He froze. The voice didn't belong to the agency. It belonged to me. Mr. Templeton, I repeated, tone even, not a shred of spite. As of this moment, Terra Systems is no longer a certified defense supplier. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The Department of Defense has updated your status to non-compliant. Unresolved, I continued, may reapply for clearance consideration in 18 months, pending a full audit and evidence of procedural overhaul. A silence, then I said it. Good luck, and hung up. No echo, no drama, just click. In my new office, across the city in a building that didn't smell like panic or old carpet glue. I leaned back in my chair and watched the skyline. The sun hit the window just right, glass gleaming, the city stretching out beneath me like a map I now owned. My desk had a brass nameplate, Elias Vance, Senior Vice President, Government Strategy behind it, my new badge. Clearance reinstated, extended, tied now to multiple contracts, not just one, not one company. I wasn't an employee anymore. I was an institution. Across the room, a junior compliance analyst knocked gently and asked if I had a moment to review a procurement file. I waved her in, smiled. Not kindly, not crew, just confidently. The way you smile when you've already walked through the fire and now keep the matches. My inbox dinged with a forwarded copy of Sentinel public statement. Due to unforeseen compliance complications, we are temporarily suspending participation in all federal defense contracting. Unforeseen. Sure. I turned my chair slightly, angled toward the window, and picked up my mug. Fresh coffee, black as gospel, hot as consequence. And for the first time in my career, I allowed myself to say it aloud, soft as a prayer. He wanted to trim the budget. She ended up cutting his uncle's empire in half. Big thanks, you legends of the old office days. Subscribe to keep the switch flicking chaos alive. Your ex-boss is shaking in their loafers.